Alrighty, so it's time to do the emotional index for May, and we're pretty much now 1/5 into the season, with pretty much every team have played at least 6 games, with most of them playing 7 games so far into their season, and even some teams have already played 8 games into the season. And I felt this would be the right time where I am going to open up the 5th tier in the emotion index, which is the panic tier. I think there are definitely some teams that as we're now crossed over the 1/5 mark of the season, that there is definitely a sense of panicking, because the team is definitely not starting the season well. And even though they were hoping that maybe in the early part of the season, when certain teams kind of struggle to come out of the gate and maybe things can turn around, that has not been the case for certain teams, and they continue to struggle. And I'll talk about which of these teams is going to belong in this 5th tier, which is, it's time to have a little bit of an early panic. The fact that the team is have dug themselves in a really deep hole, and now they definitely need to get things going if they want to potentially have their hopes of making the playoffs still open. But we also have the tier where it's going to be, we're not having a good time, which is pretty much a tier where, things have definitely not gone well in the beginning of the season, but at least it's not at a point where we need to really push the panic button. You have the tier in the middle, which is always the meh. It could be better in terms of how things could be going, but it could have been a lot worse in terms of some of the other teams that are struggling in the beginning of the season. We have the 2nd tier, which is, they're pretty much feeling pretty good now, above the red line right now and in playoff position. And then, of course, the top tier is basically everything is awesome. Things are so well right now that we're near the top part of the table, and we can't wait until the playoffs, of course, begin. So, that being said, let us actually begin with the first team. And just like the last emotion index, I'm not going to go alphabetical order in terms of these teams. And we start off with the LA Galaxy, and yeah, the Galaxy is pretty much in this tier where, everything is definitely awesome for this Galaxy team. This team right now is in 3rd in the Western Conference right now, and have won their first 5 out of their first 7 games. And not only the fact that Chicharito is already have some early conversation, and pretty much maybe even leading the conversation of being MVP this year, but the fact that they probably have just discovered their starting, or discovered their future goalkeeper in Jonathan Bond, who, not only the fact that Jonathan Bond has already started to make some cases that he could be the newcomer of the year, but he might even be the goalkeeper of the year. Like, this is a guy that, we talk about at the beginning of the season. There's always tends to be players that you probably not have heard of him to be decent, but then as the season goes on and he continues to perform, you're definitely going to hear his name. And I feel like Jonathan Bond is that guy where nobody knows a lot about this guy, and there was definitely a lot of skepticism in the Galaxy fan base that he is going to be just as good as the previous 2 goalkeepers that they had. And my oh my, he is even better than the previous 2 goalkeeper that he has. And again, last week he of course won Player of the Week against the Quakes, where he made 12 saves, which I think that's the most that any goalkeeper has made so far this season in a game. And yeah, there's definitely some conversation that he could definitely be the goalkeeper of the year, and really the reason why this Galaxy defends that. When I look at this backline of the Galaxy, it's still a bit of an issue, and there is definitely times it could be a liability, but the fact that Jonathan Bond has been just incredible is the reason why he's kind of putting some smoke and mirror in terms of this Galaxy backline, that in reality it isn't really good, and it can definitely be exploited. But we move on to the next team, which is Toronto FC. And for TFC, I'm going to put them right here where, yeah, I don't think a lot of TFC fans are having a good time right now in terms of how the season began. Now, obviously, a lot of that has to do with they have tons of injuries that they're dealing with right now, but they are starting to get a little bit healthy. We did saw Pozuelo play for the first time in the last game, which is definitely good news for TFC fans, because they desperately need Alejandro Pozuelo back in their team. But the reason why they're still not really having a good time is because they're still near the bottom of the Eastern Conference, and you assume that maybe once they of course get guys healthy and maybe if there's going to be another big signing that they made in the summer. I mean, I know they recently got Jefferson Cincinnati, but something tells me TFC is not done in terms of signing a player in the summer, and especially that player could be the player that replaced Josie Altidore, knowing the fact that there seems to be some very sour relationship right now between Josie Altidore and the team, and especially with Chris Armas, with the whole disagreement that is going on. And I really feel like that might be the case where that could be the last time we're going to see Josie Altidore in a TFC jersey. I mean, we already said before that most likely Altidore could be leaving this team at the end of the season, but after this latest situation, something tells me he probably have one step out of the door right now, and I'm pretty sure TFC is hoping to maybe find a replacement, or maybe the fact that they hope Ayo Akinola can step into that role. And so far, Ayo Akinola, he hasn't really had a spectacular season, and in some way kind of have a bit of a sophomore slump after his incredible year that he had last season. But TFC will hope that of course is not going to be the case, and if it is going to be the case, maybe they're going to look for another big name player, because I think right now they currently have 2 DP in their team. I think Altidore is one of the DP, if I'm not mistaken, and if he's out of this team, then they do open up a DP spot because of that. But now we're moving on to FC Cincinnati, and for Cincinnati, yeah, I said before in the last Emotion Index where FC Cincinnati is pretty close in terms of getting to the panic stage, and as we're now 1/5 into the season, they are now at the bottom of the Eastern Conference, and although they finally got that much needed first win against Montreal, yeah, things have not been going well for this FC Cincinnati side. I mean, I will say this for FC Cincinnati, as bad as things, of course, have gone right now, at least in these last couple of games, they have showed some fight and have kept it close, and they haven't been like what we saw early in the season where they were just getting blown out by opposition. But they at least have kept it close in some of their games. But yeah, at the end of the day, they're still at the bottom of the Eastern Conference and currently have one of the worst points per game ratio. Actually, they have the second worst point per game ratio besides the Chicago Fire, but they also have the same amount of points with the Chicago Fire, which I believe they only had like 4 points so far to their season, which is still tied with the worst points total so far this year. So in some way, if you are keeping track of the Wooden Spoon title, FC Cincinnati and the Chicago Fire is currently tied with that spot. Now, moving on to Montreal. For Montreal, they're going to be feeling pretty good in terms of how things have gone. Now, I know things lately has been kind of a little bit inconsistent with this Montreal side. I mean, there's times where they have looked good and there's times they haven't looked good, and also the goal scoring of this team, at least in these last couple of games, have also been kind of inconsistent. But at least one thing is consistent with this Montreal team is, in terms of the attack, is they're still not creating a lot of chances, and this is also going to be one thing that I think a lot of people, and especially Montreal fans, are kind of a little bit nervous. The fact that they're not creating much in each of these games, and if they're so far, I'm pretty sure they are definitely performing over their expected goals so far for this season. And once those kind of chances that they're not created, they're not going to be as clinical finishing as they have so far this season. What's going to happen to this team? Is this team going to go through a dry spell and basically started to go down the hill like we've seen before? But as of now, at least they're respectable in the standings. I believe they're currently 5th in the Eastern Conference, and they also have been able to get some good resources, especially on the road, where so far this season they already have won 2 road games, and this is a team that historically has not been a really good road team. But now moving on to the Portland Timbers, and for the Timbers, they're going to be right here, where I think if you ask a Timbers fan, they'll say that they're feeling pretty good right now where they are right now. I mean, I know, yes, they're currently 7th in the Western Conference, and things have not really got off to a good start for this Timbers side, but you got to remember, this team is right now probably the most injured team in the league right now. Like, there was a span where pretty much all their goalkeeper were on the IL, and they had to rely on their an emergency goalkeeper out of El Paso by the name of Logan Ketter, who has done well ever since he stepped into this Timber side. But besides that, when you look at their injury list, that is just super long right now. They're still staying above the red line right now, and I've said before, where as long as this Timber side can stay above the red line, and once guys start to get healthy again, this team should be much better and should rise themselves up the table. And in some ways, when you look at the past couple of games, like if you don't include the last game against the Union, where I feel like that was the game where that injury list that it was so long that it started to really kind of took a toll on them. The last couple of games, even with that same injury list, they were still winning games and still getting 3 points, and that's something that I definitely did not expect from this Timber side, especially how injured they are right now. So, but now moving on to the Red Bulls, and for the Red Bulls, yeah, they're kind of right here where they're kind of pretty much explaining this definition of meh. It could be better and it could be worse in terms of how their season has go. I mean, if you look at their home form, things have definitely gone well for this Red Bull side. I mean, besides that first game of the season where they lost 2-1 against SKC, they have been pretty much untouchable at home and have been able to get 3 straight wins at home. But then when you look on their road form, that is the problem for them. I mean, they have not won a single road game or even got a point on the road so far this season. And therefore, whenever you are a team that struggle on the road, but you tend to get points at home, you're pretty much going to be right in the middle, though, which is, yeah, it could be better, where we hope that our road form can improve in the future, but at the same time, it could also be a lot worse, where we have some teams right now in the league where both the home and road form is not going well, and at least we're one of those teams that are kind of doing what a lot of MLS teams are taught to if they want to maybe get themselves in the playoffs, which is get your 3 points at home, and hopefully on the road you might sneak out a point, so you can of course make sure you can maybe sneak into the playoffs. Now moving on to the Seattle Sounders. Yeah, the Sounders are pretty much right at the top here, where everything is definitely awesome if you're a Sounders fan. Now I know the last 2 games, this Sounders team did start to show a little bit of vulnerability with them dropping points in back-to-back games at home, which is something that is very rare that the Sounders do. But when you look at this team, and even with them dropping points in their last 2 games, this team is still at the top of the Western Conference and still has the best record in MLS. I mean, I don't think I need to really explain any more than the fact that of course is the case. And let's also not to mention the fact that their defense is pretty much the best defense in the league. Like, this defense is pretty much untouchable. The 2 goals that they conceded so far this season, or the 3 goals that they conceded this season, has all came either from set piece or from the penalty spot, which means they have not yet conceded from open play. So, as long as they can, of course, continue to do that, it really doesn't matter if their attack is kind of like sputtered in these last couple of games, because if your defense is that solid, you're always going to have a chance to get victory, and that's what the Sounders team has at least done in these past couple of games. Now moving on to the next team, which is Atlanta United. So for Atlanta, yeah, they're kind of also right around this spot where it could be better and it could be worse in terms of how things have gone. I mean, there's been times where Atlanta has shown that they can be that team that was a couple of years ago, which was a free-flowing kind of Atlanta attack and a team that is the best team in the league. But then there's also times where they look like the Atlanta of last season, where they struggle in terms of creating chances and also struggle in terms of scoring goals. But at least one thing for this Atlanta team is that they're kind of right where I expected into the 1/5 of the season, where they're just right now hovering around the red line. And by the way, right now in the Eastern Conference, there seems to be a log jam between 3rd through 10th place, where there seems to be only a 3 points gap between that spot. So Atlanta, if they can of course get a win in their future game, and depending on what the team around them do, they can basically jump themselves all the way back up the table, let alone just get back above the red line. And not to mention the fact that, as I said, this is kind of what I expected them where they're supposed to be at this point of the stage, because there is still a lot of these guys that still hasn't really gelled to get there yet, and still hasn't get going. And I expect maybe I'll give it another couple of weeks, and maybe even get to the second half or the halfway point of this season, where Gabriel Heinze is going to figure things out, and we're going to see this attack start to get going, and we're also going to see Joseph Martinez start to kind of fire it up a little bit. I mean, Joseph Martinez so far, I believe has 2 goals so far to this season. I know he hasn't really looked vintage Joseph in these first couple of weeks, but I'm assuming that he's going to be that prime Joseph as we get in the latter part of the season. Because remember, I think the season that he's been having right now, just to show you how it's so difficult to try to come back from a torn ACL injury. And you're not going to see like a Jordan Morris every time where a player can just instantly make a big impact after they came back from a torn ACL injury. But now moving on into the next team, which is Nashville SC. Yeah, Nashville is also going to be right around where Atlanta is, where, for Nashville, I know they're one of the 2 teams to have yet to lose a game this season, and they're actually the only team in the Eastern Conference right now to yet to lose a game this season. But the issue for Nashville this season is that they're drawing way too many games. Like, they are literally the draw king of MLS with the League 5 draw. And when you look at some of these draws that they have, some of them they could have easily got win. And some of those, I think, was the first 2 draw that they have, where, yes, even though they went down 2-0 in those games and came back to draw 2-2, they had tons of chances to find that third goal and to come back into those games. And because of the fact that they have also drawn so much this season, they're not really moving up near the top of the table. I believe they're currently 7th in the standings right now. And there's an old cliche that says, even though you are not losing game, which will definitely get you down the table if you start to do that. If you also don't win games, then it also kind of do the same thing, because if you keep drawing games like Nashville is doing right now, and other team around them, of course, getting wins, then yeah, other team is of course going to pass them. So yeah, for Nashville, they definitely need to, of course, start to try to get some wins together, and also knowing the fact that they also, I think, have played the most home games out of any team so far this season, because they have had a lot of home games to start the season. Yeah, I'm not going to say that there should be concern with Nashville fans of how this team will perform on the road, because so far when I look at how this team perform on the road, they've been pretty good. I mean, they haven't lost so far when they're able to go on the road, and have done the necessary thing to get points on the road as a recipe to try to make the playoffs. But it will also be interesting if they can, of course, turn those road points into wins, and also the same case with their home form, where they need to really start to turn those times where they drop points at home into victory, so they can move up the table. But now moving on to RSL, and for RSL, they're also going to be right here. So for RSL, after an incredible start to the season, and it seems like Rubin is scoring bicycle kick goal every single week. Well, technically, he only scored one bicycle kick, but you get what I mean of how Rubin seems to be just a very surprising package to the beginning of the season, because it seems like he was scoring every single week. He has definitely started to cool off a little bit, and that is the same case with this RSL team, where they have definitely cooled off a little bit after they have started very well to the season. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that their attack is definitely not hitting in sync, and I'm kind of not surprised by that, because coming into the season, that was my main concern with this RSL team. Like, in the attack, who do you have on this attack that can really make me think that it could really threaten? Like, maybe Damir Kreilach is the guy to do so, and maybe Albert Rusnak is going to do, but Rusnak hasn't done much, and it seems like he's reverting back to his 2020 form. And talk about Rubin, I think that's really the only reason why RSL had such a good start to the season, because he was the only guy that can, of course, score on a regular basis, and now the fact that he is cooled off, it's no surprise that this RSL attack has really struggled in these last couple of games, and not to mention the fact that they also have dropped points at home this season, which the home form was supposed to be the thing that RSL was hopefully going to use as a way to make it to the playoffs, and especially some of the points that they drop at home. That no draw against Nashville has to be very frustrating if you're an RSL fan, because they really couldn't figure out that RSL kind of backline, which actually, I don't think RSL fans should be disappointed about that, because pretty much every team can't figure out this Nashville backline being how sturdy they are. But the 1-1 draw against Minnesota, yeah, that one hurts them because of how they were. I didn't think they had a good game in that one, but they were holding on to a 1-0 lead, and also the same case with Minnesota. They didn't have a good game, and then the goalkeeping howler happened with Zach McMath, and that is the reason why they only got a points out of those games. And those kind of resort is going to really hurt this team if they want to maybe have an outside chances of making the playoffs. But yeah, overall, I think RSL fan, right now, I think they'll be happy with the way that they're in right now, because they knew coming into this season they are not going to be a playoff contender, especially the fact that they still have not had an owner, and that there is still a lot of question of who exactly is going to be the owner of this team. I expect this is going to be what we're going to see with RSL this season, which is a team that is probably going to be right in the middle, or right near the bottom of the Western Conference. Oh, also, speaking of home form, and speaking of heartbreaking home form, the game against the Quakes, yeah, they were also up 1-0 in that game, and then Wando happened. And then they conceded those 2 late goals, and that one probably hurts even more than what happened in the last game against Minnesota. But now, moving on to FC Dallas, and I think Dallas is probably the first team I'm going to put here on the panic tier. Well, technically Cincinnati, I basically put them right here around the middle, but Dallas is really the one that it is definitely time for early panic, because these results that they've been having in the beginning of the season have not been great whatsoever, and that the fact that they're also at the bottom of the Western Conference table was something that Dallas fan did not expect this team to be. Like, this team, especially what they did last season, a lot of people were thinking maybe they could improve, or maybe the fact that they're going to be like that team where they're going to be good enough to make it to the playoffs. But then once they get to the playoffs, that's where the issue is. But right now, this season, it's not even that case. It's just simply they're not good enough to compete this season, and it's not surprising the fact that they're not good enough to compete, because a lot of these guys in this team has really regressed heading into this season. Like, when the attack, nobody can score goals in this team, and then in the defensive area, they also look very, very shaky in terms of that. And if you add both of those together, then it's no surprise that this Dallas team is really struggling this season and are now at the bottom of the Western Conference table. But again, that is something that a lot of Dallas fans are definitely kind of panicking, because this is not what they expected this team to be heading into this season, being the worst team in the league as of now, as we're now 1/5 into the season. But now moving on to LAFC, and yeah, for LAFC, they're right here, where I'm pretty sure LAFC fans are definitely not having a good time in terms of how this team have started this season. Like, as much as the media is trying to keep hyping them as a team that is going to bounce back and potentially be that team that is going to be an MLS Cup contender, the biggest issue for LAFC right now this season is the fact that whenever they play against good team, they aren't able to get victory against them. And again, even though I know they have played a lot of tough teams this season, and their schedule hasn't been really the easiest to say. If you're going to be an MLS Cup contender, guess which team you're going to be facing in the playoffs to potentially get to that promised land? Oh yeah, that's right. You're going to be facing the likes of Seattle, the LA Galaxy, or even similar quality to NYCFC that they faced in the last game. And the fact that multiple time, or not even multiple time, but every time when they play against a tough opponent and they falter, no matter if they're on the road or at home, that is got to be very, very concerning if you're an LAFC fan. Now, I know some LAFC fans will also say, well, we also have had injuries to deal with so far this season, and we haven't had Carlos Vela healthy for majority of the season. Well, yes, that is the case, but you do know that Carlos Vela did play in that last game against NYCFC alongside with Diego Rossi, and yet they still struggle in terms of going forward on the attack. Like that, I feel like that probably is even more alarming, knowing the fact that you can't even use the injury excuse anymore. And also, we've seen teams right now this season, like, hey, the Seattle Sounders, they do not have Nico Ladero and Jordan Morris, and yet they're still at the top of the standings. Like, I feel like the injury excuse for LAFC, I don't think that's a valid excuse, because we've seen other teams that have injury issue, and other good teams that have injury issue, and they're still at least staying afloat or being near the top of the table right now. And if you're a championship side, you need to of course have a lot of good depth to of course eventually get to that stage. And the fact that it's been shown that this LAFC team clearly doesn't seem like that they have that good depth going forward is definitely a bit of a concern, because like I said, just like what a lot of the MLS media said, this is supposed to be a team that should be competing for MLS Cup. But when I look at how this team has been playing in this first couple of games, they have not looked anything close to resembling to an MLS Cup contender. But yeah, moving on. Inter Miami. Yeah, they're right around here where it is definitely time for panic, or at least early panic for Inter Miami fans, because it's not just because of the fact that this team is inconsistent to the beginning of the season, but at least in these last couple of games, they have gone from inconsistent to simply just be a very bad team. And I'm also not going to really get into talking about the whole situation where they break the rules and that they actually had 5 DP in their team, because I'm pretty sure everybody have heard about that. But besides that turmoil that they have off the field, on the field they have just simply not looked good at all. I mean, it just feels like early in the season when they actually did look competent and did look like a team that maybe could make some noise this season, has a lot to do with the Higuain brothers definitely doing very well. But ever since they kind of cooled off a little bit, yeah, this team has just not looked good at all from both their attack and in their defense. And I think that 3-0 loss against DC at home, that was probably the lowest point that they have so far for this season. Like, to be playing at home and to be that flat against a DC team that have struggled to score goals, and them putting up 3 goals past you at home, that has to be the lowest point, and that has to be a point where a lot of Inter Miami fans are probably panicking, knowing the fact that this is going to be another long year on top of the mess that they of course have created off the field. But at least I will say the good news for Inter Miami is that maybe Messi is coming to your team in a couple of years, and maybe if he does come to your team, maybe things are going to be a little bit better. But like I said in the news of the week, there's still no guarantee if that is going to happen, especially that reports that I talked about is still in early development, and there's no guarantee that is the contract that Lionel Messi is going to agree with Barcelona late in these next couple of weeks, or even in these next couple of months. But now, moving on to Sporting KC. For SKC, yeah, they're going to be right here where everything is awesome and also feeling pretty good. I mean, for Sporting KC, after a slow start to the season, they have definitely started to pick up in these last couple of weeks. In fact, they're actually one of the hottest team right now in the league, picking up wins left and right. And a lot of that has to do with getting some of their players back healthy, and most importantly, getting Alan Pulido back in the starting 11, where he has really shown why that Sporting KC really missed him last season. And also, if he can continue to put up the numbers that he has, he can also maybe in an early contention of winning the MVP this season. But yeah, everything is going well for the Sporting KC team right now. I mean, the only thing that maybe isn't going so well is the fact that they have still shown some defensive vulnerability at times this year. But I think besides that, and also when you look at where Sporting KC is right now in the standings, a lot of SKC fans are going to be very happy where they are right now. But moving on to New England, for the Revs, yeah, they're going to be right here where everything is awesome, because believe the Revs right now is at the top of the Eastern Conference, and although they still at times showed some issue going forward on the attack, and especially at times they have shown that they have problems in terms of finishing their chances and also in the final third. This team have continued to, of course, get points, and the fact that, again, since they are at the top of the Eastern Conference table, I don't think a lot of Revs fans would be that concerning, even the factor that I talked about, and that as long as they can continue to get points, they're going to be very happy with where they are right now in the standings. But now, moving on to the Colorado Rapids. For the Rapids, they're going to be right here where it seems like they're also pretty close to everything is awesome, because, for this Rapids team, after a bit of a slow start to begin the season, they have won 4 out of their last 5 games and have really started to risen up the table. And this is also kind of what I expected from the Rapids, where, despite their early struggle, I was expecting that this team should not go through a downgrade and have a regression. And in some way, I think Rapids fan was definitely concerned the fact that they started to see their team off to a slow start, and a lot of those guys that they signed to long-term contract have a regression. But ever since, it seems like most of those guys have picked it up, and this Rapids team has definitely been risen up the table because of the recent hot streak that they have been run right now. So yeah, I think Rapids fans are going to be feeling everything is going so well that they're now really started to push for the top 4 of the standings. But now moving on to the next team, which is the Vancouver Whitecaps. For the Whitecaps, it's interesting because, I don't really know what I want to say about the Whitecaps so far this season. I mean, there's been times where they have looked promising, and it looks like they took that next step in terms of potentially could be a playoff contender. But then there's also times where they just look bad and just look like a team that have regressed back to the first year of them going through this deep, long rebuild. I mean, so far this season, when I look at this team, it seems like they're heavily rely on set piece opportunity. Like, most of the goals that the Whitecaps have scored so far this season are on the set piece, but set piece opportunity, while it's good to, of course, score those, and while it's good to be dangerous with those opportunity, that is something you simply cannot just ride on if you're going to maybe be a playoff contender, and especially the fact that they still struggle in terms of building up a place besides going on the transition. And also the back line still look very leaky at time, I think, for the Whitecaps. Right now, it's hard to tell whether or not if this team is actually going to be moving into the next step and follow the schedule right now in the timeline, because again, at times they look like that is the case, and then there's times where they look like they've gone backwards in terms of this long rebuild that they are currently in right now. But now moving on to Orlando City, and for Orlando, I think they're going to be feeling pretty good so far with their season, and that's even with that 2-1 loss that they suffer against the Red Bulls, because I really felt like that was a game that they dearly missed Nani. Like, Nani is a guy that is really the one that is carrying this attack so far for this season, because without him, I don't think this should be a team to be where they are right now. But similar to what I said about the Sounders, since this team, even though they are struggling in the attacking department, and that they are definitely hoping that they can, of course, get Daryl DK back as soon as when this break is over, although they're probably going to only have him back for only a couple of games before he probably is going to be sold off to Europe. But, the thing about Orlando City, and why I think they're still near the top of the Eastern Conference, is that their defense is very stingy. Like, this team has one of if not the most stingiest defense in the Eastern Conference. This team does not give up a lot of goals this year, and anytime when you are a team that don't give up a lot of goal, and even if you do have trouble in terms of scoring goals, you will still find a way to, of course, get points, and still find a way to get all 3 points. And so far, at least for Orlando City, they have been able to not only be very stingy on the defensive area, but they just find enough going forward on the attack to, of course, get themselves points on the road and also at home to push themselves near the top of the Eastern Conference. But now moving on to DC United, and for DC, I'm actually going to put them here. Now I know DC are not in the they're actually, I believe, in 10th place right now in the Eastern Conference, and they're still way below the red line. But you know, the thing about DC and what has to be encouraging if you're a DC United fan is the performance that they put in that last game against Inter Miami, and that I really think that was the first time when we really finally saw that this DC team can actually do much better in terms of their finishing and actually put the ball into the back of net. Because when you look at the bad run that they had in this season, especially the last couple of weeks, I really think their bad run this in their last couple of games isn't really because of the fact that this team just simply don't have enough to, of course, get all 3 points, but more because of the fact that I thought they played very well, but they just don't have anybody to finish. Well, in that game against Inter Miami, they of course shown that they can of course put the ball in the back of net and finally found that finishing touch. Now, granted, yes, that was Inter Miami, and I did mention how Miami is definitely one of the worst teams in the league right now, but it is still very encouraging the fact that DC is able to find that finishing touch. And really, finishing is very contagious, where if you have players that is able to put the ball into the back of net, you're going to start to see those guys get confident and eventually start to score a couple of more goals. So yeah, this is a DC team that I think people should watch out for. And again, I also feel like Hernan Losada has done a great job with this team. And if you actually look at my video where I talk about ranking all these new head coach heading into the season, even though I did kind of have Hernan Losada a little bit low in the standing, I feel like I should have put him a little bit higher because I really think he's doing a very good job with this DC team, especially when you look on paper. This is not supposed to be a team that you think could be a decent one, but yet I think Hernan Losada is doing a great job getting the best out of this team. And if they can just find their finishing and continue to look like what they have been in the past couple of games, this team can definitely find themselves going above the red line. And not to mention what I said earlier with the Eastern Conference, how logjam that is between 3rd through 10th, and DC United is one of those teams that is part of that. They can get a couple of results in their favorite, and other teams, of course, lose around them. They can definitely get themselves above the red line. But now moving on to the Chicago Fire, and yeah, for the Fire, they are right here where, you know, if you're a Fire fan, it is definitely time for an early panic, because this team, you know, I talked about earlier in this season and in my first Emotion Index, where there's definitely a lot of concern with how the Fire has been playing and how they have looked nothing like the team that they were hoping to now push for the playoffs. And in many ways, a lot of guys on this team that did very well last season, they have totally regressed. Like Robert Beric, a guy that was one of the top goal scorers last season, well, he is really struggling in terms of finding the ball into the back of the net. Although I will say this with Robert Beric, he kind of did have that spell last season where he weren't able to put the ball into the back of the net, and it feels like he's having the same issue this season. And that you hope, if you're a Fire fan, that with the way that he kind of starts finally able to get into that form and finally able to score a bunch of goals in a short amount of period in the latter part of the season, that it's going to be happening in the same case this year. Because if that's not going to be the case, then there is got to be a lot of concern with this Fire team. Because when you look on paper, you look at all the players that they had, this team should be a good team. This team should be a team that should be above the red line right now. But it just feels like they just cannot put it together. And not to mention that there's also times where they're still having the same issue of last season, where there's times where they do look like they dominate a game, but they cannot find that finishing touch. And then they had just that one kind of lapse of daisy moment, and next thing you know, they find themselves on the losing end. And I think the last game against Montreal was a clear example. I mean, they were definitely the better team in that game against Montreal. I even said in the review, I thought they were going to get that first goal, but because they had that lapse of moment later in the latter part of the game where Montreal got that winner, that was the reason why they didn't get anything out of those games. And that has to be very frustrating if you're a Fire fan, knowing the fact that your team is definitely really playing well, but then you just had that one lapse of concentration, let the other team score a goal that turns out to be the winning goal, and all that good effort that you put throughout the game was just not enough, and you end up getting nothing out of that game. But now moving on to Austin FC, and for Austin FC, I'm gonna say they're right here where, after that good start that Austin FC has, I know they of course did start to cool off a little bit, and I know some Austin fans, if I would have done this emotion index maybe a week earlier, they're probably right here where, yeah, we're definitely not having a good time in MLS now. Our team have lost 3 in a row after that good start. But again, like I said, this is the growing pains that every expansion team has, and I kind of feel like after that promising start that they had, I don't want to say that was kind of fool's goals and that was smoke and mirror, but maybe this has to do with the fact that they were kind of a little bit ahead of schedule, and then now reality is starting to set in where this is kind of what we expect an expansion team has to go through, and especially an expansion team that is playing tons of games on the road to start the season. You can really see that the amount of road games that they have played in the start of the season is really starting to take a toll on this Austin FC team. But that being said, they did get that huge result against the Seattle Sounders, getting a 0-0 draw out of that, and they do have one more road game left, which is against Sporting KC, and actually that is the only game that it is going to happen on that weekend. There's kind of a weird schedule for Austin FC and also for Sporting KC too, where they're the only team that is going to be playing on June 12th, and then after that weekend's action, everybody will come back to MLS play after this mini summer break. But yeah, for Austin FC, if they can of course just do well in that last road game before they open up their new stadium in June 19, I think this team is going to do things. And that right now, when I look at where they are at the standings, they're still in a good spot. Where for a team that's been on the road for so long this season, now that they're going to start having some home games, and I'm assuming they're going to do better when they're playing at home. This is where Austin FC can really start make up some points and can rise themselves above the red line in these next couple of home games. But now moving on to the Columbus Crew, and for Columbus, I'm going to say they're going to be here where for the Crew they're starting to find their stride a little bit. I mean, I know early in the season they were really struggling, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the Crew were kind of maybe suffering a little bit of a mini MLS Cup hangover, but also a combination of them being in the CONCACAF Champions League. But in these last 2 games they started to look like the Crew that we know of, and then that last game that they had against TFC, they finally were able to score a goal in open play, which, it's kind of shocking the fact that the Crew was not only struggling on the attack, but they were the only team in the league up to last week to have yet to score an open goal, and Columbus finally defines that by scoring an open goal and really started to look like the MLS Cup, or look like the team that won the MLS Cup last season. And if you're a Crew fan, hopefully that is going to continue for them to continue to rise themselves up in the standings. But now moving on to the Philadelphia Union, and for the Union, I'm going to put them right around the same spot as the Crew, and pretty much I'm going to insert what I said with the Crew to what I said about the Union, where yeah, they're starting to find their feet a little bit, mainly because with them having CCL commitment, you can definitely see that CCL commitment was starting to take a little bit of a toll on them, and they weren't really doing well in terms of their league form. But once they're now out of CCL, well, actually they're not out of CCL yet. They're the only MLS team that is in CCL, and they're going to be playing that semifinal against Club America, I believe, in August. But until then, knowing the fact that they only have one thing to focus, you can definitely start to see that they're getting much better in these last couple of games and getting points, and also rising themselves up the standings. But now moving on to the San Jose Earthquakes, and for the Quakes, I'm going to put them right here, right below LAFC, and I know a lot of Quakes fans would think that I should put them right here. I mean, 4 losses in a row, it seems like it's a free fall that the Quakes are dealing with right now, but as bad as this losing streak is right now, I don't think the Quakes are playing badly in terms of these 4 games. And I know some people will say that I'm just being optimistic or by saying the Quakes are not playing very badly, or I'm just kind of sugarcoating with the way that this team is not playing good. Which, I will say that I will talk about a little bit later why there is some issue with this Quakes team. That is the reason why we are in a 4-game losing streak. But in general, when I look at this 4-game losing streak and all the games that they play, they have not played badly in any of these 4 games. Like, all 4 of these games, they have been very competitive, and even in some of these games where they eventually fizzle out, at least they showed some fight and really made the opposition to, of course, get wins. Now, the issue with this team and why we are in this 4-game losing streak, and really, I think there's only one issue that is the reason why we are in this 4-game losing streak. Well, maybe 2 reasons if you want to include how the defense in this team is still not looking very good. But the one prime reason why this team is in a 4-game losing streak is they just can't score. Like, it doesn't matter how many chances that they created that this team has throughout this 4-game stretch, they just cannot put the ball into the back of the net. And in fact, I actually did check the expectancy goal stats earlier before I did this emotional index, and I actually found out the Quakes are actually at the top of the chart in terms of expected goals, and that they actually have the highest expected goals out of any team in MLS. But as I said before, this is also a reason why I don't look at expectancy goal, and I don't really use that as a way to say, oh, this is the reason why the Quakes are not playing very badly. Because at the end of the day, expectancy goal is still just kind of like a phantom stats, and at the end of the day, even if they're leading the expected goal chart, and that even though they should be scoring more goals when you look at the chances that they create, at the end of the day, they aren't putting the ball into the back of the net, and they have trouble in terms of scoring. And if that is not going to be fixed, this could once again be a very long season with the Quakes. And not to mention the fact that Almeida, you can clearly see in his past couple of press conferences, it seems like he's getting tired. I mean, he feels like he can't really do anything else to improve the team, which maybe that definitely increased the talks, and maybe eventually he is going to leave this team sooner or later. But until then, I just feel like this team clearly need to solve their issue in terms of finishing, because heading into June and also in July, this is also the stretch where I talked about before, where this is the toughest stretch that the Quakes are going to be in this season, where 6 out of their next 7 games is going to be on the road. And knowing the fact that the Quakes are not a good road team, and hasn't been a good road team for these past couple of years, I do have a lot of concern the fact that this losing streak is going to not just, this losing streak could get even worse if they started to draw points and continue to lose on the road. So in some way, I think that is the reason why there's a lot of Quakes fans that is kind of panicking. But if you want to take the optimistic stand, at least when you look at these last 4 games, they have not looked like a team that is just pretty much just going to lay down and let the opposition just completely kill them. They at least have looked competitive and also create the chances to, of course get goals, but it's just the finishing that is the issue with this team. But now moving on to NYCFC, and for NYCFC, I think they're going to be feeling pretty good. I mean, for this NYCFC team, I can't really make of this team. Like, there's times where they look really good and they look like a team that could be finish near the top of the Eastern Conference, and then there's times where they kind of look bad and doesn't look really good at all. But knowing the fact that they are still above the red line, I don't think I should question them being bad. And that, again, as long as you're above the red line and as long as you're in a good playoff position, I don't think any fans would be complaining about their team in terms of the situation that they're in right now. So that's kind of the same case with NYCFC. As long as they're in a playoff position, and as long as they're maybe going to make the playoffs, and not to mention they just recently make a big signing in getting a talented 18-year-old Brazilian named Thales Magno, which I have heard a lot of people have already said that he might be the next Neymar coming out of Brazil. We'll see whether or not if he's going to be continue to he's going to make a big impact to this NYCFC side. But now moving on to the Houston Dynamo, and for the Dynamo, they're going to be right here if I actually, I'm gonna put right around the same spot where the Red Bulls are, and I'm pretty much just gonna insert the same thing I said with the Red Bulls and insert it to the Dynamo, where this is a team that when they're playing at home, that they're gonna get 3 points and able to get points even though no matter what opponents that they play. But whenever they go on the road, that's when the issue is with this team, and it's not really a big surprise because this has been an issue for the Dynamo for the past couple of years, and there's just going to be always that one of those teams that they tend to do well when they're playing at home, but whenever they go on the road, they tend to really struggle. And the only thing I will just give the Dynamo is that at least with them doing well at home and at least trying to maybe get some points on the road is good enough for them to stay above the red line in the Western Conference. And I think that's something that their fans are going to be happy, knowing the fact that a lot of their fans thought that this was just going to be a throwaway year for the Dynamo and that they're not going to be competitive whatsoever. And then finally, the last team I'm going to talk about as I conclude this very long video is going to be Minnesota United. And for Minnesota, they're going to be right here where, again, after that 0-4 start to the season, and this team, of course, have not lost a single game and have gone on a 3-game unbeaten run. And again, things definitely have gone a lot better for this Loons team, that they have finally started to get some points and get a couple of wins after they couldn't do both of those things at the beginning of the season. But when you look this team deeply, and you actually dive deeply in this team, they're still having the same issue that they're having during that stretch when they went 0-4 to start the season. I mean, the goal scoring is still not there with this team. The midfield has really no creativity besides Reynoso being in the starting 11. That is, he's trying his best to generate any creativity out of this team. And of course, on the defensive area, yes, I know the Loons have only conceded, I think, 1 goal so far in the last 3 games. But let's be honest, this team in terms of the defensive end is still not very good. Like, during those stretch, they have played against teams that struggle to score goals. And my only hope for this Loons team in terms of the defense getting better is the fact that Debasi is back in the starting 11. And I feel like with him being in the starting 11 in that RSL game, you can clearly see he made that defense instantly improve and more stable than I've ever seen so far for this season. But again, I'm just really hoping that he can, of course, stay healthy and he doesn't go down with an injury, because if he does go down with an injury, that's when I do have concern with this Loons defense, that it's just not stable whatsoever if Debasi is not in the back line. But yeah, at least things are getting better with this Minnesota team. But the only thing that I do still have complaint besides the fact that they still haven't looked like the team that I know from last season is the fact that they're still in 12th in the Western Conference. So despite the fact that they did make some stride and go unbeaten in the last 3 games because of how deep of a hole that they dug themselves in, that's why it's going to take time for them to try to climb up the table. But hey, at least, I talked about how the Eastern Conference, there seems to be a logjam between 3rd through 10th. It's the same case with the Western Conference, where there seems to be a logjam in the Western Conference, where even some of the worst team in the league is still kind of in it right now, where if they can get a couple wins together, they can really jump themselves above the red line, and also depending on what other team around them does too. But either way, that is pretty much it for the Emotion Index. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of the Emotion Index, and did I rank your team a little bit too high in the Emotion Index or too low? Or if you're a fan of one of these team, or if you're a fan of an MLS team, let me know in the comments below, where do you rank yourself in the Emotion Index? Are you feeling everything is awesome right now? Are you feeling pretty good about how this season began? Are you thinking that it could be better in terms of how this season has gone, but we know it could definitely be a lot worse with the way how our team has played? Or you're at this rank where, yeah, we're definitely not having a good time with how poor of a start to this season. Or worse, you're at this bottom tier, which is the panic tier, where everything is on fire right now. Things are just so bad right now that I think we're pretty much out of the playoff contention. Let me know in the comments below, but either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I, of course, will see you guys next time.